Hey guys, welcome. Built from scratch. Filming this in my basement, in my bar that has a lot of different stuff from my past, some from my future, my present. But one of my favorite places to hang out, so I thought it'd be pretty cool to film this down here. A little bit more detail on my past, just so you know where I'm coming from. Parents from Dublin, Ireland, first generation American here. They moved to the States in the late 60s. You know, they grew up together since they were kids in Dublin, dated through high school, got married after college. And after that, they moved to the States. Eventually ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Had 5 kids. I'm one of the 5. I'm the middle child, so older brother, older sister, 2 younger brothers. Kind of like the black sheep, I'd say so. I'll get into that later on. In '82, we moved to Kennett, Missouri, down the Boot Heel, Missouri, and lived there to 1988. So pretty cool growing up in a small town. Played a lot of sports. BMX racer. Skateboarder, martial artist, a lot of independent sports. Also played other team sports as well, but really more of an independent sport type of kid. In the 80s, we moved to St. Louis, or actually St. Charles. My dad got promoted through Emerson Electric. Went to St. Charles West, local high school, played some football. Did pretty well, hung out with a good crowd, but after I graduated, my dad passed away about a week after graduation. Never made it to my graduation. He was bedridden. A little bit out of it, really actually didn't even know I was going to a graduation. And after he passed, man, it just set me on a whirlwind. It just set me down the wrong road, pretty pissed at life, pretty pissed at God, kind of lost faith in my future. It hurt pretty bad, and to a point where I didn't want to get married, I didn't want to have kids, because I kind of felt like I was so much like my dad that I almost had the same destiny, and I didn't want to chance putting a family or my family or kids through what we went through. And it led me into hanging out with the wrong crowd, experimenting with alcohol and drugs, things that just kind of drowned my emotions. And then it eventually came one day having to talk with my older brother that, man, no one's going to change my life but me. No one's going to control my future but myself. So I made some big changes for myself. And I got away from that group of friends, and I started just working different jobs to try to put myself through school. I went to community college for a few years. That didn't work out. Went to Rankin Technical College for a few years. At that point, I had a bad hip injury working for a courier company that put me supposedly at 20% disabled. Doctors are like, here's your pain pills, your anti-inflammatories. Don't play sports anymore. Quit working out. Find a sedentary lifestyle so you can kind of let the joints of your hips just take it easy. And if I didn't do that, I would eventually have a hip replacement and have severe arthritis and all these other things. So, gave me my prescriptions, which I never filled. I wasn't going to deal with that. That was not something where I felt my future was going to be determined by him. So, though he was an orthopedic surgeon, but it did it did force me a little bit into a little bit more of a little depression. Dealing with the pain, trying to figure things out, and that's just what led me into my self-studies. Worked with one of the therapists I worked with through my rehab, explained to me, she's like, listen, man, you had an injury that really hurt your back and hurt your hip, but I can tell you that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. You must have been a very accident-prone child because you have so many imbalances on one side of your body. And it made me go back and realize, like, man, one, I owned my own set of crutches as a kid because I was injured all the time. But 2, I was a soccer player, so I mostly kicked with my right foot. I was a skateboarder, mostly pushed off my right foot. Martial artist, favored my right side, so did more kicking. So a lot more stability got built on my left side. Prime movers got a lot more condition on my right side, but I had a really weakness in my hip, which really started giving me problems in my late teens, early 20s. And then when I had this accident, man, it just kind of exaggerated, or I don't know what you say, really created even more of an injury where it became chronic. And it made me go into more self-studies on anatomy and biomechanics and nutrition and how it all plays a part in balancing out the body and balancing out inflammation. And I really took to that. Even though I didn't take to school, I really took the studies of learning and empowering myself to heal myself. And it took me quite a few years. And through those years, I got into sales. So I got into a non-active lifestyle through a job. I did door-to-door sales. I did cold calling sales. I did car sales, which sucked. I did customer service positions. And I eventually worked for a company called Diagraph Corporation. And supposedly they only hired people with college degrees. And I was the first employee that they hired who didn't have a college degree. And that was because I did so well on my personality test. Not because I have a great personality, but because of all my different sales position, I was really good at customer service and relating with people and dealing with objectives. And so I got hired, worked in the customer service department, but knew that inside sales was going to make me an okay living, but the goal was to get to outside sales because that's where the money was. And with Diagraph, it was a product identification company. So I sold all the stuff like the inks and the paper that went with the machines, but the outside reps sold the big machines. And then what we would do is that when they went down, we would have on-site techs go and repair those. And I realized through that time that there was no communication between the sales reps and the techs. And a lot of our big clients, Oscar Mayer, Coca-Cola, they would, if one of their lines went down, man, they would lose a ton of money in one day if that was down, if we couldn't get a tech out in time. And most of the sales reps were not very mechanically inclined. Well, me going to Rankin Technical College, I had a pretty good technical background. So I actually started going in 2 hours every morning before my work, which I started at 8. I'd go in at 6 a.m., go into the technical side of the company and work with the technicians on site on how to fix machines and how to build the machines that we sold to these companies. Knowing that down the road, when I became a sales rep, I would be one of those reps to, if a machine went down, if it was basic or pretty not too extreme, I would be able to fix and get them back up and running. And that would make me much more valuable, not only to the company I worked for, but also to my customers. And that actually led the owners of the company, the president, to see me putting the effort in. And that led me into creating a new customer service position for our technical department, to which I developed, trained the employees, and created that position for the company and for myself. And it was to the time that I was getting ready to get promoted to an outside position that the company got bought out. They downsized. A vice president came to me and was just like, there's no point of us putting you back down to customer service position. Just per your experience, it would not be a good route for you. So they put out a good word to a few other companies and gave me a pretty good severance. And I was getting ready to get hired by IBM to sell computers in St. Louis after so many interviews. And it just came to the point where, man, I didn't care about computers. I didn't care about software. I just wanted to be successful. But I just didn't want that to be the rest of my life. And, my brother came to me, and at that same point, I just got done rehabbing myself. I helped my hip problem. I started working out again. I started getting back in shape. And my brother was just like, man, wouldn't that be cool if you could do that for other people? Like, help other people who felt like they were hopeless because the doctors told them this and their life was completely changed. Like, how good would that feel to help other people overcome things like that? And it was just like that aha moment, man. It was just like I saw a new path for myself. So what I decided to do is I got a national certification and I put myself through it. And actually, with all my self-studies prior to that, I passed it pretty easy. And at that point, man, I just remember driving home one day and driving into the sun, and it was just that moment, man. The moment I knew I was going to make changes for myself and I was going to find my purpose. And I did, man. I went in the next day, suit and tie, red power tie, went to 24 Hour Fitness in St. Charles. At the point, they just had a camper at the time. And my friend Deborah J. Westhughes was the one doing the interviews, and she laughed when I showed up in a suit, but man, I got hired. I got hired from there, and turned out to be a pretty good career. Was one of the top trainers in the company the first few years. I had a goal to start my own business within about a year and a half, but it ended up being about three and a half years before I met the right people and the time was right where I was able to leave, get my own building, and start my own personal training business. And from there, it's just a whole new road. But man, the story behind this is just like, it takes work. Everything takes work. You got to build skills, you got to build experience, but you also have to look down the road. You have to have a long-term vision of where you want to get yourself. Because if you don't, how do you get yourself there? Like, how do you create the value for yourself to be able to do what you want to do without getting the experience and the skills to do it? So I can tell you right now, sales was hard. But man, when you become a personal trainer and you try to sell yourself to somebody for $1 a minute on the average, that's when you better be confident in your product. And another thing with sales, if you don't appreciate your product and you don't know your product inside and out, you will not be very good at selling it. And again, especially if you don't appreciate that. So I had a lot of confidence in myself based on what I did for myself. Also because of the studies I put myself through, I knew I had the knowledge that most trainers didn't. So it set me up for success. And that's just a whole nother story on where that one led. So I hope that hope you guys enjoy that story. That's a little bit of my background, kind of where I came from. and kind of how I got to where I am now. So thanks for watching, and hope you guys keep following me, and see you next time. Thanks.